Check. If everyone could grab a seat, we'll get started in a minute. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Tim, our piper. Tim, along with Jack, who's here, Coghill, used to pipe in with my dad in his role of Marshal of Convocation every year for a part of his job he was so proud of. So we thank both of you for being here to pipe my dad in one more time here at Carleton. My name's Ian Mortimer, and I'm the son of Brian Mortimer, and it's a real pleasure to have you here at Carleton University to honor his life today. Many of you commented when you walked in the same way I did, what a beautiful building this is at Carleton. The alumni comment maybe, where were these buildings when we went here? But the truth is, it was a lot of hard work of a lot of people working with my dad, and a lot of them in the room here today, his colleagues at Carleton, who built a better university that we get to host in today. So thank you to all of you as well for being here, and thank you for your work to give us this beautiful building. My dad used to comment that when Carleton was founded, it was very insular, focused on the quad and the Tory building and the library, and it was a thing he often brought up, that the school should face the beautiful river, and here we are facing the river. Maybe because there were better birds facing this way than like that. And he was really passionate, funny enough, about that footbridge that's now built out there, that he thought it was important to have a place to walk into Vincent Massey and for people to come from the south to access Carleton through that way. And he wanted it in the first round of the light rail, and he got it in the second. So it's nice to, if you want after, if you take a walk over that bridge, you can certainly think of him. So to start, I'm gonna ask Pat Mortimer, my dad's sister, to come up and share a few words.
Is this okay for short people? Yeah. My brother always said that no speech should be longer than 4 minutes. Sorry. I wanted to talk about Brian as a brother to all of us. There's a lot of siblings. Brian was 2 when I was born, which means we grew up together and I got his hand-me-downs. As kids, we were all jammed together in a very small house, so we played outside a lot. We played kick the can over the whole neighborhood. We rode our bikes to the river, and Alan and Brian would build these amazing things in the backyard, like a pirate ship made out of old planks and tires in the jungle gym, or a rather dodgy zip line across the backyard, or my favorite, the freestanding extension ladder held in place by guy wires that you then would climb up and over the top. Brian was a kind of a scrawny kid, but he loved to climb. So he'd be the first one up and over, or he'd be the first one up the tree, or to shimmy up the tire swing so he could tie something off on it. But he's also very curious. And I mean, fork in the electrical outlet kind of curious. We had a tub washer growing up that had on top of it a wringer that you squeeze the water out of your clothes. So the younger folks Google it. Brian was fascinated by this ringer, and eventually his arm had to go through it. Nothing was broken, it's okay. One day a bus driver stopped on the road outside and went running in to tell Mom that there were two little boys standing right on the edge of the roof, So she came out, and Brian had this idea that if he could make a parachute out of a sheet, and he would test it with a cinder block first, and then he'd go. Not enough height, that's the only problem with that. When he'd go to school, he'd stop in the middle of the road if he had a good idea, oblivious to the traffic. Mom once said that if he made it to 16, she was gonna have a celebration. And he was a handful. He broke bones, he broke teeth, he broke many pairs of glasses. But many of his lifelong interests showed up at a very early age. He loved the outdoors. He loved walking, hiking, camping with the scouts, canoeing, chopping things down at the cottage. I remember one Sunday afternoon trip to the Gatineau Park, and on the way home, we suddenly realized we'd forgotten Brian. So Dad did a panic U-turn and went up, and he was sitting quietly on a rock by the parking lot. He said he knew he'd come back, but he was enjoying listening to the birds. He loved to read, and all his life he surrounded himself with books. I remember he and Mom would trade quotes while he did the dishes. And the summer that he went out to Alberta and worked as a hired man, he would sit on the rail fence and he'd recite poetry to the cattle, who, if you know anything about cattle, are excellent listeners. And then when he was driving a big fancy tractor across those huge Alberta fields, he would get it set up, put his book on the steering wheel, and just trundle along till he could hear gravel, which meant he'd hit the other road, turn it around, put his book back up, and come back the other way. He enjoyed music. He picked up the flute at high school, and he and I played together in the Brookfield Band, and with Alan, we played together in the youth orchestra, and with all the kids, we played together at Christmas in our annual Christmas concert. He loved tea. One band trip, he had sort of announced that he was having a tea party in his room. So most of the kids figured this was a euphemism. Clearly this was a euphemism. And were a bit disappointed when they crashed the party to find out he was serving tea. There were 7 kids in our family, spread over 15 years, which meant while Alan and Brian and I were contemporaries, for the other 4, he was a big brother. Rather hairy, bearded big brother who had left home by the time they grew up. But he was also a big brother who cared about them and hadn't forgotten them. And he met them where they were, whether it was tickle fights with Alex, or thoughtful exchange of letters with Donna, or introducing Carol to Scottish country dancing. Family was important to him, and he wanted these younger siblings to have experiences. When they were just kids, he invited Donna and Carol to join him in Alberta. He introduced them to the mountains and to hiking. And when he was in Britain for his PhD, he invited at one point or other all 4 of the younger kids to visit him, and he took them to see things all over the UK that he thought they might enjoy. And when Alex was just a Dungeon and Dragon playing 13-year-old, he loaded him into his Chevy Chevette and took him on a road trip to the Maritimes. But these weren't just sightseeing trips. Brian was a born teacher, so these were journeys of discovery of the history, the geography, the nature, the literatures. And when Brian was living on Junction Avenue, Alex, who was still in high school, would drive over on his bicycle, and they'd put pennies on the railway tracks to see what happened. And they'd sit together over tea and biscuits, And Brian would tell him all the family stories and secrets and things that as the youngest one in the family, he would never have gotten to know about. And all of us felt we could always ask him for help. Or the help came without even asking. Carol remembers being pregnant and getting ready for the Christmas party, and cleaning the house was just overwhelming. Brian found out somehow, showed up, cleaned the house, got in his car and left. And there were so many other stories of his kindness. But I want to end with just how grateful all of us were for the support and care he provided to Mom and Dad with Ruth's help over many years, which allowed them to age in place for as long as possible. I know Mom depended on him greatly. He was a good son, and he was a good brother.
Thank you both, beautiful. I'm gonna ask Anne Clark Oka to come up to say a few words about my dad's time here at Carleton.
Another short one at the microphone here. So I'm really honored today to have been asked to give you just a little bit of Brian's history here at Carleton. And thank you, Ian, for asking me and inviting me to take on the role. You'll have to indulge me. I'm going to probably read most of this because his role at Carleton was complex and it was really important, so I don't want to make any mistakes. Anyway, many of you would already be familiar with Brian's long and active career at Carleton, but I want everybody to appreciate the depth, breadth, and the lasting impact of his work and how profoundly he helped shape the Carleton we know today. I first met Brian in the 90s when we were asked to serve as faculty representatives on several committees examining financial restructuring during the university's financial crisis. Hopefully many of you don't remember that. As a mathematician, Brian brought the science, and as an accountant, I brought the art. Together, I think we made a good team representing the faculty perspective. As the university approached the new millennium, the difficult financial decisions that were made during that period positioned Carleton well for the challenges ahead. It's hard to fully capture the decade of change that we were entering. Not only a new millennium, but a decade of major changes. So many of you will remember that in addition to financial pressures, Carleton also faced a reputational challenge. Although we had some of the province's lowest entrance averages, we had some of the most rigorous academic requirements for graduation. Brian played a major role in developing a new set of academic regulations for undergraduate programs. While it may not sound dramatic, it was an enormously complex undertaking and significantly improved student retention and success. At the same time, our student administration system was literally hanging on by a thread. It had been custom built at Carleton and was becoming increasingly difficult to find programmers who could maintain it. The new system we implemented represented a dramatic departure from what we had known before, and Brian took on the enormous task of guiding the faculty through that transition. He developed a roadshow presenting the changes to every academic unit on campus, a diplomatic feat that few people could have managed so effectively. I vividly remember the morning that the new registration system finally went live. We sat together watching, actually quite a large screen, wondering whether students would actually be able to register for their courses. There were nearly 100,000 course registrations depending on that moment. Brian sat there stone-faced, staring at the screen in silence. Then finally, a chime. One student had successfully registered. Then another, then another. Brian's expression transformed from intense concentration to the widest grin you've ever imagined. As if it wasn't enough change in that era, we were also faced with the university's greatest challenge yet, Ontario's double cohort. With the elimination of grade 13, post-secondary institutions suddenly faced 2 graduating classes applying at the same time, potentially doubling first-year enrollment. These students were not only different ages, but they also were arriving from 2 very different curricula. In preparation, Carleton strengthened its student-focused approach and established the Dean of Students' Office. Leonard Legrande became an inaugural dean, and he selected Brian and me as associate deans. I focused on the student side, Brian took responsibility for administration. In that role, one of Brian's major responsibilities was amalgamating 6 separate undergraduate registrarial offices into a single integrated unit. Each office had its own culture, traditions, and ways of operating. Brian successfully brought these together, and they were into a well-functioning organization, and they were prepared to handle the enormous enrollment surge ahead. When Brian later became Clerk of Senate, one of his most important responsibilities was overseeing convocation ceremonies. The culminating moment in our students' university experience, Brian had a true gift for bringing dignity, warmth, pageantry to these occasions. I often wonder how many homes across the country display photographs of proud graduates standing beside Brian in full academic regalia, just as you see there. Those photographs are treasured memories for countless families. As we moved towards retirement, Brian continued to play an important role, not only at the university, but also in helping many of us prepare for a new chapter in our lives. He organized a bi-weekly lunch gathering that brought together a wonderfully eclectic group of former colleagues: a journalist, a religious scholar, mathematicians, an engineer, a physicist, historian, librarians, and somehow an accountant. We rarely spent our time reminiscing about old Carleton stories. Instead, we took it upon ourselves to solve the world's problems. As you can imagine, the conversations were lively, thoughtful, and often hilarious. Many of us brought our spouses and partners along, and through those gatherings, I developed a deep and enduring friendship with Brian's partner, Ruth. I hope these few reflections give you a greater appreciation of the important role that Brian played in making Carleton the outstanding university it is today. Thank you, Brian, for being an extraordinary colleague. Thank you for being a wonderful friend for so many years. And thank you most of all for introducing me to Ruth, whose friendship I will always treasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. My dad loved Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I think he once made my sister and brother and I a CD with, I think, 16 covers of that song. From organ and Judy Garland to like reggae and ska, and yeah. It's like Pat said, sometimes he'd surprise you, yeah. When my grandfather, my dad's father, passed away, I remember him saying to me very specifically, everyone grieves in their own way, and every way of grieving is the right one for those people and you and yourself. Poppy was very, very proud of his grandchildren. He was Poppy to his grandchildren, Nika, Arthur, Teddy, Clara, Finley, Jenna, and Alice. And some of those grandkids are going to come up to share a few anecdotes now, and others will be at the reception after. I know my boys are ready at the bird watching station to help you spot some birds. But I'll welcome 4 of those grandkids up to share a few of their anecdotes now.
I'm Alice, and growing up going to Gran and Poppy's house shaped us as kids and now young adults. Learning to play and be curious, someone who was always there to push us on the swings, let us play games on his phone, and give us the best advice on how to clean the turtles in the back garden was Poppy. with his bushy beard and his snazzy carabiner watch, tucking us in at sleepovers after reading us a book or helping us sail our pirate ship on the rocky waters of the bathtub. He stays with me in good morning waffles, shared birthday parties, and when people stop on the side of the road to look at the birds. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenna. My favorite days in elementary school were the days once a week, where Gran would pick my sister and I up from daycare early and take us to their house for snacks and books. Poppy would be in the garden pushing us on the swing set, or doing a puzzle which usually involved math. I would try to help, but I gave up easily, as I did with anything that involved numbers. I should have paid closer attention because he had a talent, or rather an understanding, that I never had for numbers and equations. Every day in my statistics lectures, I think about how I would have passed with flying colors if he was here to teach me. Instead, I settle for scraping by with a pass, and I hope that he's proud of me. His memory lives in the way I was taught to set the table, in sleeping babies, in pancakes that are slightly too big, in chickadees, and in every poppy I see.
Hi, I'm Finley. He was a big nature guy. He loved organizing all the walks, and I was a big frog kid, and he knew this, so he would find a trail that had a lot of frogs, and he'd walk it in the morning just to make sure that there were enough frogs for me, and then take me in the afternoon. I remember when I was a kid, for some reason I thought my bed should be a lot taller. I needed like a loft bed. And so he came right over, a couple of 2x4s, and got the job done. And yeah, those acts of kindness were just how he showed his love, and I'm very grateful to have experienced that.
Hello, my name is Clara. I'm about in the middle of the ages of the grandchildren, and I'd like to start off by saying one of the many pieces of advice that Poppy gave, and that is, don't eat anything bigger than your head. This is just one of the many wise words that he gave. And this was difficult not to do at times because I am an avid watermelon lover. I would now like to share with you all a poem that reminds Ian and all of us of Poppy. It's called Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, and this is how it goes. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Jennifer Lambert, one of Brian's two stepdaughters. Brian Mortimer has been an important part of my life for 35 years. I think back to the many hours I spent at the kitchen table deliberating over what to study at university. He always had a special insight into the struggles of university students, and he had helpful questions to ask and provided perspective and calm guidance. As the years went by and I deliberated further over what to study, jobs, where to live, what was best for our kids, and the many decisions of life, inevitably I would come out with, I could do this, but it would be hard because of blah, blah, blah. His response was always, you can do hard things. If you want something, make it happen, even if it's hard work. I never had Brian as a university professor, but I'm confident that he never said math was easy. The constant message was that it's okay if it's hard. You can do hard things. And over the years, I've always smiled when I heard him pass the same message on to his grandchildren, whether they were trying to tie their shoes or pull a wagon full of their cousins. They shouldn't stop trying just because it's hard. So for all of us who will be missing that calm guidance in the years to come, it will be hard, but we can do hard things.
I can echo my Aunt Pat. It's a lot of pressure. I remember every convocation, because my dad as clerk of Senate had to go to, Marshal of Convocation went to every convocation, and in June it'd be getting warm and he'd come back to the backyard and I'd catch up with him and he'd say, you know, sometimes for the honorary degree recipient, you just have to say the right thing on the right day to the right people. So no pressure today, Dad, thank you. I want to begin with the end because it's probably the least important piece to remember. But progressive supranuclear palsy is a terrible disease, and its worst effects did not spare my father. Ruth, your support your care and unwavering devotion to him through his years of illness were remarkable. Thank you, and a job incredibly well done. I also want to recognize the care and support that my sister Lucy offered during those difficult days, especially your epic walks, which kept Dad out and about where he wanted to be, and we all saw how happy he was when he got to go outside. I also want to thank Angus, my brother, for his support, driving and supporting Ruth, and all the siblings and family for support during these difficult years. And finally, I want to thank my dad for the example he showed in the courage and strength he showed in the face of such a difficult end. I was reminded and comforted in those tough days by finding my dad reflected in the close of Tennyson's Ulysses. Made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. But yield we all must, and to remember my father best is to turn the page on the illness that took him, and instead look to the rich life he led and what he gave all of us. For my siblings, Lucy and Angus, who I have the privilege of speaking on behalf of today, and myself, there are so many fun memories of younger years with my dad. Him reading to us treasured childhood stories like Winnie the Pooh, him going to his sisters to learn how to French braid so he could braid Lucy's hair, fun trips to the experimental farm for the horse cart, Harvey's for a treat, CD warehouse, again, something younger people can Google, or even a glorious trip to Wilco in Maryville Mall. Exciting, but he made it exciting with his excitement. We had magical road trips as well in the Nissan Multi, a little further afield than Maryville Road, with stops for mini golf, living history museums, and chip wagons all along the Trans-Canada Highway. Grandkids would probably be surprised if they could see the gusto with which he would join in games in the backyard, especially kick the can, carried down through the generations, I guess, which we would play for hours. My dad had a love of learning and teaching that was never far. Our arts and crafts paper we drew on were invariably algebra tutorial worksheets, which he'd taken from school. And December and April would mean stacks of exam booklets to be marked piled up around us in the den. And we would seemingly encounter an above average number of geometry and arithmetic lessons in our day-to-day life. Perhaps the most illustrative story was when there was a big argument between the three of us about which way it was shorter to walk to Carleton Heights from our house. It's an irregularly shaped block. So by the next day after school, my dad had built a giant protractor and a measuring wheel out of cardboard and led us on a research mission to measure all sides of the block and each corner's angle. Then it was back to the kitchen table where we had to learn the formulas and crunch the numbers. Sure enough, Claymore was much shorter than Senyo. As we grew older, my dad was a constant support of each of us. For example, driving Angus at all hours to practice the organ at Glebe St. James. He would also be present at our paddling regattas, watch him quietly from shore. And we went to talk to him between races. He'd offer us perspective, reassurance, and maybe a comment on a bird he'd seen, providing that balance to the competitive environment we were racing in. You always had to chuckle, all three of us, his children being strong athletes, when his own mixed results in organized sport were a family legend. Pat didn't tell it, so I get to, it's good. The story goes that while playing Carleton Heights outdoor hockey league, so they actually had outdoor hockey league at Carleton Heights, my dad had a perfect pass slid across the ice to his stick. And the dismay of his teammates, it slid right past his stick as he stared up into the blue wintry sky. Later, my grandma asked him, "What were you thinking? What happened when you missed the pass?" And he replied, "Oh, I was trying to think of the next line of a poem." From early on, my dad also made sure we knew our bigger family. Centered around his parents' house on Falaise Road, we knew our aunts and uncles. We spent holidays with them. But beyond that, we knew about them. We knew their jobs, what they went to school for, what they were passionate about. And I realize now he did this on purpose. For us to know different pathways in life, he was building a map of the world through the people we already knew and loved, a window into different ways of living. As time moved on, my dad and Ruth would put on epic 50-plus person Christmas parties at their home. My dad would brag the day after about how many kilometers he walked within the house. I think it was 7 or 8, up, down, sideways. Certainly it was lots of fun, but it was also a deliberate act of gathering for that extended family, making sure the younger ones in our family knew what it meant to be belonging in a bigger group, that eclectic mix of family members who cared for them, built with intention but by my dad and Ruth year after year. All 3 of us attended Carleton University, which was a good deal in the end. These were special times at Carleton for us 3. With my dad in his office never far away, we would always have a chair in his office to flop in, to talk about our day, have a chance to connect with him in that different professional setting. It was always comforting to walk through the quad and look up and wave at my dad sitting at his desk on the 4th floor of the Tory building. My dad would also bring the Mortimer cousins together at Carleton. When a chunk of us were there at the same time, in the same years, my dad would invite us every week at the faculty club for lunch. He'd bring the family together and let them know there'd be support. And Kirsty, who can't be here today, emailed me. She thought now maybe he was also getting some live feedback on how things were going across campus. During his illness, I wrote my dad an email to reflect on the different professional lessons which I learned in those years as I grew in my master's degree and watched him in his role with Anne and Leonard, the power triumvirate up in the Dean of Students office. I shared with him that he would remind me never ever make personal comments about anyone, talk about their ideas, listen to each other. He would remind me that deep thinking is never wasted time. On meeting efficiency, he would wryly joke with me that if you conduct a meeting properly, everyone only has to make their point once, something we all strive for but never seem to accomplish. The most lasting lesson was the way he managed and worked with people across campus. During a heated faculty strike, instead of going in early or sneaking under Bronson Bridge to avoid the pickup line, he would roll up to the line on foot from Colonel By or with his windows down in his car, ready to listen and talk to the faculty out on strike. He would also make it a point on the first 2 days he was back after any labor issue to do a tour of every department on campus, to reconnect with colleagues, have a personal conversation, and start the healing in a very direct way. For a child of 2 Albertans, my dad certainly made his 100 acres of Ottawa home. When my brother traveled as an athlete, he had a running joke with my dad that our little corner of the world in Carleton Heights was the Shire. And through all the travels, we'd be returning home safe to our little patch of the world. Indeed, it's fitting to think about the tight geographic region of my dad's life. His childhood home was a block away from where he lived the rest of his years, his elementary and high schools, and the university where he studied and worked, all within 3 kilometers of each other. So much of his gifts were given locally to those close by, yet those ripples spread far and wide, an example of how to truly make a positive impact. Over his 32 years working at Carleton, tens of thousands of students sat in his classes, benefited from his passion for teaching, for the beauty he saw in mathematics, his ability to share that excitement with them. His leadership and vision helped shape Carleton to the school it is today and helped ensure it stuck to its founding and guiding principles in the process. He stood on stage to hand all 3 of us our degrees, along with cousins, friends, thousands and thousands of others who he took a real honor in congratulating. In each student, he saw a piece of his legacy walk off the stage and out to shape the world. In 2010, my dad decided to retire early, which in hindsight was truly a gift. 10 years of unhurried time in which he and Ruth could travel, search out birds and bookstores across the continent, head to different beaches, and spend time together in their garden. well-earned time for them to spend together. It also meant that in those 10 retirement years, my dad turned to volunteering at Carleton Heights Public School, which he attended as a child, and many Mortimers as well, as including the three of us, also attended. He worked closely with Heather Hollingsworth, volunteering in her 3rd grade class. She would assign him students who needed a little bit more help. A newcomer to Canada, a child a bit more vulnerable, or those who just needed help with a certain task. Poppy, as he was known to those students too, took the time to learn each child's interests, understanding their learning style, and be there with kindness and support. The children would be happy just to go to the library with Poppy to pick out a book to read with him, but he would go the extra mile, helping them with tasks as wide-ranging as their arithmetic, learning their first book to read to a new sibling, or learning just to tie their shoes. Heather would observe him going home to reflect on how he could connect just a little bit more with each student. And we don't think Poppy knew, but he was really a celebrity in the school. If he was out on one of his walks and would go past the school and happened to be spotted, Heather said the grade 3 8-year-olds would fly to the window just to give him a wave. A special figure to all of them. In Heather's own words in a letter she wrote to my father, she wrote, "It was more than your time. It was your insight, your thoughtfulness, your kindness, your tenderness, your understanding, and your support. You made a difference in those students' lives, and I will never ever forget your contribution." I must admit there's pain in knowing how much of the difference my dad made to those young students when my boys Teddy and Arthur will not have the same opportunity. But dwelling on this loss would wholly miss the point. It would miss the lesson, the very lesson that he lived. Belonging and meaning come from fitting ourselves into our own narrative. Learning, growing, staying curious, making the effort, thinking of others, and enjoying the world around us. My dad was an educator and showed the way. And all of us can still know and learn from him. We can build our own stories, stay curious, learn what bird is calling in the morning, read the book, think about other people's point of view, reflect on and build the world around us we want to live in. This is not a consolation. It's the whole point. My dad was not a religious man, so when I bring up a weighty tune like this, it might make some of you nervous. But this is my version of a family Bible. My dad and mother's complete work of Shakespeare, annotated in her own hand from her university studies in English. A reminder of the power of meaning, learning, and building our story across generations. I'll close with Hamlet's reflection to Horatio on his recently departed father. He was a man, take him for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again. Thank you. Can't see I think the piper will now play his lament. thank you everyone for coming. It's so special to have you all here. We have lots of food for a reception afterwards, so please stick around. And we have a bunch of the items you might not know. My dad had lots of little hobbies for building beautiful things, so his stained glass and some of his carpentry work are here, as well as a bird watching station if you want to try to spot a bird outside. My kids can definitely help you out. So thank you all for being here. And I picked, of course, some of my dad's and my favorite moving songs, but I did want to close to start us for our party with a song, and then we're just gonna go back. We don't have to line up and do the handshake thing to slow us down from the food, but I did want to close. When we were little kids, on those road trips, one of the tapes we used to play was Traveling Wilburys, and I wanted to close with something where I think my dad would just turn to say, "Don't you think that's a little on the nose?" Thank you, everyone.